Hi, everyone. Delighted, excited on this episode of Words, Images, and Worlds to be talking with someone whose voice you might know. My guest is a writer and is also a voice actor, and that is the very talented Paul Rugg. Thank you,
Thank,
Paul, for joining.
thank you very much for inviting me.
Absolutely, a pleasure, a pleasure. People out there will know you for work in the world of WB animation in particular. You've also worked in the world of video games, and a personal favorite of mine, work on the Freakazoid series as
Oh
well.
yes, yeah, that was fun. That was probably the most fun I think I've had. It was scary and horrifying and frightening, but at the end of the day, we'd all be like, "Hey, that was kind of fun." So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We'll explore that a bit, but I'm curious by means of an origin story, what led you to writing, the creative arts, acting, this field?
Um, I guess I was always the class clown and kind of the idiot. I did terrible in school, and so I knew that probably being an accountant wasn't going to happen. Um, so I basically went to college and majored in screenwriting, and then I realized you don't really need to major in screenwriting. You just should start writing. Because you'd sort of, I love movies and everything. But then I joined an improv group, which I loved even more because you don't have to write anything. You just sort of make it up as you go along, and then you go home and you watch TV. So I was with an improv group, and we would write sketches, and we do a little improv, do little sketches called the Acme Comedy Players in North Hollywood, California. And it was myself and Adam Carolla and John McCann and a bunch of other people. And they had just finished Tiny Toons, and when they were working on Animaniacs, they realized they wanted to have a very sketch comedy kind of feel. Um, so they brought me in, they brought John McCann in, and sort of presented, that this was basically the Marx Brothers. And this is before anything had been written. There was like a Bible about this thick, and a Bible in animation means everything we think these characters are. And they sort of shoved that at me and John McCann, and they said, "Hey, why don't you do one?" And John McCann did another, and so that was like my first paid real writing gig. And I thought it was going to be a one off. And it was like, okay. But I really resonated. And having come from that sketch comedy background of zing, boom, bang, um, and combined with sort of my love of the Marx Brothers, which is what Yaku Aquadot are based on, it felt very good to do. But I will say that I'd never written an animated script before, and in those days, the Warner Brothers method, and I don't think they do this anymore. But as a writer, you would call all of the angles. Uh, Angle on dot, close up, over the shoulder shot, scratch and sniff down on wacko, camera pans revealing, and you had to just basically say everything that you saw. And at first that was very intimidating, but then I started to, use that as part of the joke. And anyway, that's a very long, convoluted way of telling you that's how I got started in animation. I'd never given animation a thought. I was a huge Bugs Bunny Roadrunner fan. I mean, Saturday morning cartoons, the Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck show. Um, there you go. That's my whole story in a nutshell.
That's cool. That's very cool. I imagine some of that intimidation continued as you were working on Animaniacs. What was that like to kind of get in that process of the writer's room and get used to that?
Well, luckily, and people don't really believe this, but a writer's room we didn't have. There were a group of us writers, and we were all on the 11th floor of the Imperial Bank Building in Sherman Oaks, California, which is where the Galleria used to be. Now it's a bunch of offices. Um, so we were right there, and all the writers were sort of next to each other, and we would go in and talk to Tom Ruger, our executive producer. Sometimes we'd go in as a group and just have a little session. But generally, we would go independently and say, Tom, in this one, I'd like the Yakko Agadat to go against Albert Einstein. And he would say, okay, you have a week and a half. And then we would all, everyone would just do their own thing, and everybody was writing a different episode. But I guess you could say we had a writer's room in that if we were having a problem, I could walk into Peter Hastings' office or John McCann's office or Sherry Stone's office and say, I'm really having a hard time with this joke. Um, so we never really wrote something and then presented it to the group where everyone could that go, what a funnier line would be. We didn't do any of that. So when you're watching Animaniacs, you are watching pretty much my version of Animaniacs and John McCann's version of Animaniacs for his, and Sherry Stoner and Dion Oliver and Randy Rogel and Nick Hollander, and um, that's kind of how we did it. The only person we had to please was two people: Tom Ruger, our executive producer, and Steven Spielberg, who read everything. And so we would get notes back from Steven saying, I really like this, or or I didn't like this. And but that was very intimidating. But it was also we had a blast. We would go down to the mall. We would play video games in the arcade down there. We would go watch movies. Um, and basically, I usually got in about 7 a.m. and I left around 4. And, while all my friends working on very important sitcoms were, literally working till 4 a.m. in the morning, we didn't do that. So it was a blast. It was a great experience. Um, and yeah, it was fun. And it was a bunch of comedy writers, a bunch of performers. All of us were performers. Um, Sort of just being jerks in the hallway and just having a good time.
Steven Spielberg was indeed involved. I remember that being a very much a part of the intro. Steven Spielberg's Animaniacs. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, nice credentials there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He would read everything, and if he particularly liked something, we would get a memo. And I remember I had been there working there about, I don't know, 6 months maybe, and I'd written a parody of Green Eggs and Ham called Broccoli, about Yakko trying to push broccoli onto George Bush, the president at the time before Clinton, and George Bush
Mhm.
notoriously hated broccoli. So I wrote this little thing, and you know, a couple days went by after I turned it in. There was a knock on my door, and Tom Ruger came in. He goes, "I have something for you." And I go, "What?" And he goes, and he handed me a memo, and it was from Steven saying, "I love this. This is wonderful." And then Bush lost, Clinton won. So my wonderful little never went. But yeah, Steven he read everything, and he would give notes and communicate. But yeah, he was very, very, very involved.
Nice. Uh, how did your experience on Animaniacs then lead to the person I see over your shoulder, Freakazoid?
Oh yeah. Well, so it's kind of a convoluted story. I think we had just hit, I forget, 65, 70, 80 episodes of Animaniacs. I was getting a little burnt out from before it became formula. I was like, maybe I just want to do something else. And at that time, Paul Dini and Bruce Timm of Batman the Animated Series fame, they were working with
Hmm.
Steven because Steven wanted to do something like Batman, but maybe a little funnier than Batman. And so Bruce Timm and Paul Dini, being the geniuses that they are, they sort of came up with some edgy superheroes for him. And this process went on for a couple months, and Steven kept coming back and saying, "Funnier, I want to laugh." And finally, it got to a point where I think Bruce Timm was like, this isn't working for me. So the WB was already going to happen, and this show was already sold, and so it had to be made. So Tom Ruger took it over, and he looked at me and he goes, "You're now on a show called Freakazoid," and I was like, "What the heck is that?" And he goes, "Well, it's a superhero show," and I was like, I don't know from superhero shows. I don't know what that means." And he enlisted John McCann, and this is in January, and we were going to premiere in September of 95. Yeah, 95. Now, normally on a show like this, Animaniacs, we had 2 year lead time. 2 years where you would write and you'd go, I don't know, like that, and I don't like this, and let's redo it. And it would be animated. No. What we did have, we had a picture of Freakazoid. We kind of
Hmm.
had a smaller Bible about this is sort of what it's about, but we didn't know anything else. The clock was ticking. Stephen would be very displeased if this show wasn't going to be made. Um, and Tom Ruger just looked at us and said, "Guys, we just have to write, all of us, whatever we think this show is." Um, so we just started writing, and there were no meetings. There was no meeting. There was just write. And slowly but surely, John McCann would write a little something. Tom Ruger would write a little something. I would write a little something, and we were all kind of on the same page of doing an anti superhero show, meaning that there wouldn't be much superhero-ness in it, um, because we didn't know how to write that. We could write comedy. So we just started really slowly but surely. We would write a script, maybe we'd make one change on it, and off it went. It was shipped. There was no thinking, no time to think about it. And I think what I really liked about that experience, apart from how horrifying and scary it was that we were just going on instinct. There was no network executive going, what should really happen is there should be three. There was none of that. It was Steven, um, kind of going, guys, just go for it. And then that way, if anyone from the WB or, Warner Brothers upper management was like, we really don't, we would just say, Steven would like this. And they'd be like, well, all right. So that was a wonderful, like, boom. That would silence all arguments about what are you guys doing. And we started getting really crazy. And then when it came time to cast, um, we were like, okay, we have to start casting this and figure out who's Freakazoid. And so we wrote all the sides, they're called, which are the audition material, and we had everybody come in. And the mask was pretty popular at the time, so everybody was giving it a nonstop. Uh, and it was really fast and energetic, but there was no drop to center, and we didn't know what to tell anybody. We were like, maybe I don't know. So we had sort of been doing that for a couple weeks, and then Ruger told me, Paul, why don't you get in the booth and we'll record you what you think this is, and then we'll play it for the actors. And I did that, and he had me go off script and improvise and do a bunch of Jerry Lewis, which I would do in the hallways for free. And he played it for Steven, and Steven said, "We don't have just have Paul do it." So that I became sort of the reluctant voice of Freakazoid. I didn't really want to do it because I needed to write as well. And anyway, you didn't ask that question, but I thought I'd give it to you anyway for extra bucks there. There you go.
Perfect. I love it. I was going to ask about stories, interactions, because you're on a show with David Warner. I remember being part of the cast, Corey Burton, all of these very talented people.
Yep.
What was that like, those interactions with the
It
cast?
it was pretty great. I mean, we had a really good time. Andrea Romano was our voice director. She did Animaniacs. She did Tiny Toons, Batman the Animated Series, and she was our in-house director. Um, so right as we're doing the first scripts of Freakazoid, she would read the rundown. Cosgrove, who is Ed Asner, But originally that it was just a cop, and Andrea would say stuff like, I think I can get Ed Asner, and we'd be like, "Wow, yeah," um, and and it was only supposed to be a one-off, and then we would hear that voice and the way he was doing it, and we go like, "Well, it looks like Freakazoid has a friend in Cosgrove now," and that's kind of the way everything would happen. Andrea would come in and go, "I can get you Ricardo Montalban," and we'd be like, "What?" And or I can get you David Warner, and I can get you Jonathan Harris. I can get you Corey Burton, Tim Curry, and it got to be this little. So we used to record like on Wednesdays from 2 to 6. It never took 4 hours ever, but that was. And what we would do, we would feed everybody, and we would have pizza. And pretty soon, Ed Asner and David Warner would start showing up closer to one to have pizza and then sort of sit around. It was just like a lunchroom and sort of just shoot the breeze and talk and it was amazing to have these amazing actors. And then Ricardo would show up, and everyone would be, "Oh yes, my friend, I remember doing that picture." And it was like the round table at the Algonquin. It was this amazing group, and everybody, not one of them didn't have a good time, and they really they brought it together. David Warner, who's known mostly as a villain, not a comedic actor, I think he really just enjoyed being comedic. And he was filming Titanic at the same time he was doing Freakazoid. And I remember going, "Why are you here? Like, you're filming this big movie. Why?" And he goes, "Well, I'm just having a wonderful time." And I'm like, "Okay, fine." So, yeah, they were great. They were great. And we made them do things that I don't think they expected. Like with David Warner, we did a parody of Hello Dolly called Bonjour Lobie, and he literally had to sing. I had written a parody of the entire Hello Dolly song, and it's David Warner singing all by himself with the backup singer. And he was like, "Oh, I really don't think I can do this. I'm not like good." And we're David, no matter how it comes out of your mouth, it's gonna be great. So yeah. And anyway, you rarely have experiences like that because the way it's done today is voiceover is virtually always isolated now.
Mm.
It's one person doing a voice, it's another person doing a voice at a different time, and then it's all put together by the editor. The way we did it, even with Ricardo Montalban and Tim Curry, we had whole cast there, and we knew from 2 to 6, we all sat in this semicircle, and sometimes there was 11 people in there, and we would always run it once. We wouldn't record. Andrea Romano would sit there and to make sure everybody understood their little part, and that's where you could see Ed Asner sort of looking at Jonathan Harris or Maurice LaMarche. Oh, so that's what they're going to do. Okay, I'll do this, and then we just we hit record, and Andrea Romano was in there, and we would just do it scene by scene by scene. Rarely doing second takes. Just like, well, that was really good. So, but it's not done that way anymore. It's voiceover is a very isolating experience now, and it was just great the way it was done.
Sounds like a jam session for
Yeah,
actors.
it was. It was. And then when you had Jonathan Harris, who was Dr. Smith in Lost in Space,
Hmm.
who was just a character, just so much fun. And he would he had a mouth like a sailor, and I think we had to delete every other word. But yeah, it was fun. It was fun. Ain't gonna lie, it was fun.
Yeah, yeah. I think that joy came through on the viewer end as well. And I remember "Hello, Lopi." I
Yeah,
remember that song very well.
yeah. It was the we had so after a script is written, it's normally boarded, and that means they sort of draw how they think it's going to go. And when they originally boarded that sequence, they added the director at the time and the storyboard artist didn't think a 5 minute song, a shot for shot parody of Hello Dolly, would be very funny. So they added a bunch of flying fishes and crazy things. And I said, guys, David Warner singing for 5 minutes in a direct shot for shot parody of Hello Dolly, it's not going to tickle everyone, but I think it's worth it. So we boarded it to be as serious as possible and with like hardly any jokes in it. And yeah, I'm real proud of that. Yeah, I think that's stupid. It's so stupid. I love it. Yeah.
There's a beauty to that. There's a beauty to that.
Yeah, there is.
Now you have since taken on other acting roles. You've expanded and been the writer and the voice. What do you keep in mind when you're tackling a role?
The voice, something that feels very natural to do, that isn't that you can click into without having it be unnatural. And what I mean by that is some, "Oh, there you can come up with a voice," but to do
Hmm.
that and to figure it out is sort of difficult. So it's sort of it's a voice that you think you can replicate and matches with the character. There was a character I did in Dave the Barbarian, which was it seems like every show I ever do is like one season, two seasons, but Dave the Barbarian was so much fun, and it was the Dark Lord Chuckles, the silly piggy, and I don't know where the voice came from. I would look at the character, and you sort of look at the character, and you just try and try and try and try and try, and then something happens. You go, okay, that's it, and yeah, and the same way with a character I did called Artifius on the Adventures of Puss in Boots, um, which is just sort of an old man, and that was, I think, the most challenging voice I ever had to find was for another short-lived show for the Jim Henson Company called Earth to Ned, which was on Disney Plus, and I operated the mouth and was the voice of the character. And I remember struggling for weeks to find the voice. I eventually found it, but yeah, it can be a struggle, and sometimes you can't find it, and they go, "Well, you're not going to be here much longer." So yeah, that's the way it goes.
Uh, And to get to juggle the puppeteering as well as vocal, that has to be an additional layer of challenge.
Yeah, especially at Henson. I started working with them around 2006. I had written a pilot for them, and they asked me to sort of join their puppet improv group, which was meeting every, I don't know, every week in the Charlie Chaplin um, screening room. And it would be Brian Henson and Bill Beretta and a bunch of puppeteers. And Brian wanted to infuse a little bit more improv into the puppeteers. So he formed this little group. And it was just an inside thing. And they said, Paul, why don't you join our group? And I was like, I've never puppeteered, let alone, I have no idea. And so they were very gracious, and I was terrible, and my characters are all floppy. Um, but Brian slowly but surely trained me. This is how you do it. And all the other puppeteers were like, no, you got to do it this way. But the way we did Earth to Ned was, it was called the Henson Digital Puppetry System, which is that you put your hand in this gizmo, and it's got all these fingers are different mouth shapes like FP, blah, 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 and making the mouth round. And so I trained for about a month at the Creature Shop, just staring at this puppet and just talking for a month. And then in that puppet, there were 7 people operating it. I'm doing the mouth and I'm talking. Alan Troutman, who's legendary Henson puppeteer, who is many of the puppets of the animals in Babe. He was next to me, and he's doing the eyes and the expressions. And there was someone inside, and there were 2 people in front with the hands. So we all have to, not only am I improvising a lot of the time, but everyone sort of has to go with what I'm saying. And it was amazing. That the Henson way of doing it is practice, 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 practice. And then one day everybody just becomes this one character. It was pretty cool. I wish Disney Plus wouldn't have been such poo poo people and let us at least another season, but I'm not in charge.
May it come back. May it come back in some way. So that brings us to the question of what are you exploring now in your creativity?
I'm exploring being a grandfather, which takes a lot of time
Hmm.
and a lot of limberness. And yeah, doing that. And I've retired, moved away from Hollywood a couple years ago. My wife and I moved away to sort of be closer to my daughter and the husband and the grandchild. And I think it was a good time because Hollywood is going through a thing. And and I think that it's sort of lost sight of the purpose of let's entertain, and a lot of people, it just got kind of difficult to pitch projects, to work there. And when I first started, literally at Warner Brothers, it's Tom Ruger and above him Steven Spielberg, and we had to please those guys.
Hmm.
Um, since in my adventures of Disney and DreamWorks, there are lots of people that are all sort of talking, and it's not that much fun because you sort of lose. They tell you what it needs to be, and then you sort of follow all of that, and the sort of sense of self of, well, I think this is funny. Um,
Hmm.
isn't really there anymore. You're more of a, okay, this is what we want. So I found, and I'm ADHD. I kind of like to do my own thing. So that's why Warner Brothers was such a good time. It was this match of what I wanted to do with what the shows were. But yeah, so now I do really stupid YouTube videos, sort of stream of consciousness. I did a video, I don't know, maybe 7 years ago now, with my Chihuahua. Um, and I just did it as a joke for my Facebook friends of him biting me. And I'm saying, this is how you relax. And that video, I mean, it has been copied, stolen, ripped off. It's got like 100 million views all over the world. And it was weird because it was like that literally took 1 minute of my time. And then all the other things I've done is like writing, and you're struggling and you're bleeding from the words, and then you just get your dog to bite you, and that's what everybody likes. So I don't know. But yeah, I'm just sort of doing little silly videos, and but yeah, just kind of calming down from what, yeah, from what everything was, and relaxing and trying to find a more creative place.
And family time, always, always a
Yes.
wonderful thing.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Where do we find the YouTube channel? And is
Uh,
there any other spot that you'd like to mention?
yeah, no, you can go to Paul Rugg's Freundleben, which is a Jerry Lewis word. Freundleben,
Hmm.
Forynlaven. Paul Rugg's Freundleben, and you'll see videos of me with my dog Lucky, and then just other weird things with friends that have, that I don't know. It keeps me busy and out of jail.
This is good. This is good.
Yeah,
Uh, Paul, a delight to meet you, a delight to talk with you. Thank you for all of the voices. Thank you for the time.
you're welcome.
Did we miss anything that you want to make sure to
No, I
share?
don't. I don't think so. I sure as heck hope not.
All right, all right. Well, lovely chatting through, and glad to have you back anytime.
Okay, thank you.